welcome. Thank you for joining us online. For those who may be new to us, USJETAA is the U.S. national nonprofit organization that's dedicated to strengthening the U.S.-Japan relationship. And we do this through supporting our JETs and our alumni. So we spend our entire mission is really to help alumni stay connected to Japan, both personally and professionally through programs and partnerships, and most importantly, community. My name is Jessica Livingston. I'm the executive director, and I, of course, was a JET. I was in Hokkaido from 2003 to 2006. And like probably all of you, the JET experience was really impactful, and it continues to shape my life and my career in meaningful ways. So we're really happy to be collaborating with JETAA Canada for tonight's event. We have one Canadian panelist on board tonight, and that was all we needed to open the door to a cross-border collaboration. So with that, I want to hand things over briefly to Schwabe, who is the country representative for JETAA Canada, just to say a few words. I think Schwabe is driving. Hopefully he's pulled over for this.
I pulled over. Hi, everyone. So as you can see, I'm in this fancy part of Ottawa, which is also a gas station. So I want to say, well, first of all, welcome everyone to this HR panel. I think it's going to be a great time. I think it's going to be a good opportunity for people to learn how to transform their skills and just look at some general knowledge. First of all, I'd like to also thank you, USJETAA, for organizing this and working with us on inviting us over on this. And I'm looking forward to learning from everyone. I won't take up too much of your time. Let's listen to the panelists. I'll pass it back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Schwabe. So tonight's event is titled JET to HR, Turning Global Experience into People-Focused Careers. And you know, many JET alumni find themselves drawn to HR-related roles over time, even if they didn't originally plan to pursue that field, which when I've talked to the panelists, that seems like that's the truth for them. But JETs build really strong transferable skills in communication and cross-cultural collaboration, conflict management, and people development, and all of this really naturally aligns with HR and talent-focused work. So we're really excited to be hosting this discussion tonight. So just to give you an outline of the format tonight, we are going to have our panel discussion, and then that's going to be followed by breakout Q&A rooms. So if you have questions during the discussion, during the panel discussion, feel free to put them in the chat. And if one of the panelists are able to do two things at once and answer them, that's great. But know that the last 25 minutes of our time together is dedicated to breakout rooms. So each of our speakers is going to be hosting their own breakout room. And then you all will be encouraged to circulate, you know, amongst the rooms, listen to the discussions, or ask your questions directly to those panelists and speakers. And then afterwards, we'll all briefly gather in the lobby again just to close out the evening. I did want to let you all know we have an additional special guest that's joining us this evening, Saskia Rock. Saskia is an HR professional, and she has recently become a corporate sponsor through her business, Saskia Rock Consulting. She's donating 5 30-minute consultation or coaching sessions, sort of like a Ask Me Anything related to post-JET, HR, learning and development, careers, entrepreneurship, all that. And she's also donating 2 seats to a Japan Consulting Office online session, which is titled Working and Communicating Effectively with Japanese Colleagues and Clients. So I'll let her introduce herself after we're done with the panel discussion and just briefly explain what that is. But I just wanted to let you know she's also going to be hosting a breakout room. And so even though she's not a panelist, she's definitely an integral part of the evening tonight. Let's see. So we have a great lineup of speakers, and we have a fantastic moderator, Rob, who's also in the HR industry. So Rob, I'm going to hand it over to you just to get us started and take things away.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. So again, my name is Rob Wee. I was an ALT in Fukuoka from, I hate to say the first part, of 1989 to 1991. And I've been in HR for, it's kind of crazy to say, but 30 plus years. And so I'm super excited to be a part of this event because I've been saying all along that JET is a a tremendous sort of background to have if you're actually considering a career in HR. And I think you'll find through our discussion today how different people have kind of forged their path within HR, building upon that JET experience. So just as a quick introduction to myself, after JET, I got into business operations with the small language school, and that had me getting involved with a lot of hiring and training activities, which then led to me finding a recruiting position. And that sort of like was my entry into HR management and sort of the work that I've been doing all along. So we have three panelists joining us today, and I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. So Angie, AJ, and Takeshi, if you could let us know, like, what is your current HR role? And then how did you get from JET to where you are now? And why don't we start with Angie?
Great. Thank you, Rob. Thank you everyone so much for joining the session today. It's great to have so many of you here. I'm very excited to learn together with you because I'm sure that I'll be learning from my fellow panelists as well. I was a JET from 2013 to 2015 in Kawasaki. I was a CIR. And when I first started JET, I had no idea that I would be doing what I am doing right now. So in terms of my HR role, if you think about the many different pies of HR, I sit in the learning and development and talent management space. And I work as an executive coach. And what that means is I don't do HR internal in my organization, but I work with external clients on their learning, development, and talent management initiatives. And so we partner with leaders inside organizations to support them to transform their leadership. And we also partner with organizations to support them to create transformation of their organizational culture towards the business objectives that they're aiming for.
Cool. And then Angie, how did you get into that from like your beginnings in JET?
Thank you for reminding me of the second half of the question. So when I was in the JET program, I actually joined a mini MBA program because I knew that I wanted a little bit more experience with the private sector and not just the public sector. And that's when I actually met a professional coach. And the more I learned about what he was doing in his role, the more I was intrigued about how I could support others in their leadership through coaching. And I had no idea actually what coaching was at that time, but I knew two things to be true. One was that through my JET experience, I had really experienced the impact of leadership. Whether it was good leadership or bad leadership, I knew that it had a huge impact on team dynamics, motivation, performance. And the second was working as a CIR, there was so much about international relations and collaboration. And I knew that the part that I enjoyed the most was creating real connections with people and working with people. And so these two interests that I really solidified through my experience in the JET program really helped open up the curiosity for the career. And I made the transition 2 years into my JET program. And it's been more than 10 years that I've been doing this. And I've continued to enjoy it so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I can't see everybody's faces, but I bet there are a lot of people just now like nodding their head thinking that's a very familiar experience while you were on the program and then kind of leading into where you are now. So thank you. AJ, how about we hear from you?
Sure, thanks. Well, hey Rob. Yeah, thanks very much, Angie, for your great introduction. So yeah, I'm AJ Filiolini. I am a JET alum. I was a JET for elementary schools and middle schools in Niigata Prefecture. You can see the picture behind me. That's sort of what my view was every day of everything. Looks familiar, I think, to a lot of us. Yeah, I was there from 98 to 2001, which was a very interesting time. When I joined, there were no computers in the teacher's room or in anywhere in the school. But by the time I left in 2001, there were a lot more things, a lot more information technology, and it's it's kind of interesting that way. And that actually feeds into my current role. So I'm the head of global total rewards at Rakuten. Rakuten, it's a big Japanese e-commerce company of about 30,000 employees. Really came out of that sort of dot-com boom in the 2000s, when things were set up there, and the internet really became big, where companies like Rakuten and SoftBank really came to prominence in Japan. I manage compensation and benefits for about 11,000 employees outside of Japan. And then also to Japan's headquarters, we provide insights and data into global programs that are run out of Japan. I got into HR in kind of a weird way. I mean, no, a lot of us, that we don't get in sort of in a linear fashion, right? So I got in um, after Jet, I worked for 5 years in IT in Tokyo for Accenture, the big sort of consulting company. And then I went back to school to business school, and I went for an MBA, and then I added a master's in HR. And there I was. After that, I joined Microsoft, and in Microsoft, I joined a rotational program in HR where I first started out as a HR generalist, where I got to work with Rob. And so that was really nice. And then I worked in learning and development for Microsoft Research for a year. And then I switched over to this current career in basically compensation and benefits. And I've really enjoyed it since that time. So yeah, you never know which way things are going to go, but you always got to keep your excuse me, your eyes open to understand, what you enjoy doing and what you like, and what the opportunities are. So I look forward to talking more with you today.
Terrific. Yeah, I love the description that you just said in terms of getting into HR in like a non-linear way. I think that actually is a fairly common story for a lot of people who get into HR, and I think it's not always the obvious path. And I think it was great that you were able to go and like get your master's and do all of those things, but there are also so many other paths for getting into HR. Takeshi, you've got kind of a different story from the other three of us. Why don't you share your journey into sort of, well, how is it that you're actually joining us today for this conversation?
All right, thank you. Yes, I think I'm a little bit different. I'm not JET alumni, but my connection with JET started with when I was a student in Ishikawa. I was in the countryside. There was no foreigners at all, and my first encounter for it was like a American teacher singing a song. I was, wow, what is this area? I'm sorry, what is this strange people? And I just touching it, and it's opened my mind like, oh, world is big. And then from then I started to think about like I want to go abroad to see the world. So after that, I always had like a thanks for the teacher who changed the life for for Japanese student living in there. So I always wanted to give it back to that community. And then now I work as a Japanese recruiting company here in US. And then I always wondered how I can give back my thankfulness for the JET alumni. So I started meeting with Jessica and then joining to be a corporate sponsorship to support for the JET alumni. So that's my connection with the JET program. And then I am a recruiting company, so recruiting is one of the portion for the HR as well. And then how I end up being like a recruiting company is I was always working for the international business development side, like create new business. And then when I created new businesses, we open the branches, new businesses, and I was always the one who is hiring the employees. So I needed to hire, do the interview, and of course, hiring the team had so many troubles, and I have to figure out how to handle the talent. And then after meeting the quick, they wanted to have some consultant, not only for just recruiting, but to be close to the companies to understand how they grow the businesses from the point of the human resources. So I switched my career and then start new businesses here in Quick USA as well. So it's all also recruiting, but I do a little business development with human resources program as well. So that's I am doing for the HR things.
Well, and that's fantastic. And I love that we have all of these varied perspectives to be able to share along the lines of, kind of pursuing an HR career. Diving into the conversation then. So My first question is, what parts of the JET experience, or your JET experience specifically, and thinking about things like the teaching or the community engagement, maybe navigating Japanese work culture or some of the other soft skills that you've developed, how have those translated well to your work in HR? And AJ, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think a lot of it is sort of some of the basics. So learning how to teach and learning how to develop curriculums and such. You always have to communicate, and whether it's for us like communicating new compensation programs, new bonus programs, stock options, etc., or benefits. So having that perspective of like, okay, how is this going to go over? How to teach it? Being able to do that. So that's sort of the basics that's there. But then and then also like sort of how to plan that out and work with it and to think about the different audiences. So that was a big one. But the other one is really stakeholder management, and especially working with different levels of people who are different ages as well. Like I think that was really useful to think about how to do that. Thinking about hey, how entry level people. We think a lot about like recruiting, and so people who are just very close to in age to the students that I had, and then people who are in older executives and thinking about what they do. I think a lot of it, especially working in a Japanese company, but it does even apply for other companies. Like I've worked at American companies and Chinese companies where the relationship management, so understanding to sort of make the connections and have informal connections with people and talk with them and to get your ideas out there and sort of as a an idea testing pad before you go and launch something like especially in corporate situations like the leaders don't like surprises, so you sort of learn how to really as a jet, you really learn how to get your ideas out there so that when they come to fruition and they get launched, it's not a surprise to people. You get support. So when the actual launch happens, it happens very easy and you don't get a lot of pushback. So yeah, I think those are probably the two biggest things I learned.
Tremendous. I thought that was a really interesting call out too, in terms of really getting that grounding and dealing with multi-generational like workforces and those differences in work styles. Angie, I noticed you nodding along as AJ was talking. What were you thinking in terms of what parts of your JET experience translated into your career in HR?
Yeah, I first of all resonated a lot with what AJ shared. So I was nodding and connecting the dots as well. And if I may add a couple of points, for me, also working inside such a big system of an organization has been really helpful. So when I was in the city office, it's a huge system of bureaucracy, if you will. There's so many different working parts, different divisions, different interests, decision-making processes, all of that. And that really informed what it meant to work both within an organization and then also with clients that have that type of context and background as they're facing their own unique organizational dynamics and norms and cultures. And I think it's taught me a lot about patience and appreciating the differences, because not every organization works the same and there's always strengths and areas of opportunity for change. And I think another thing that really working inside a Japanese culture has really helped build is this sense of discipline around work. I remember the first day of the JET program, we had one of the leaders from the Japanese government gave us a training, and he said, everyone that's not here now is late. And it was like 10 minutes before the session started. And he said in Japan, if you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. If you're 10 minutes early, you're like gigi on time. And if you're on time, you're already late. And I think it was his way of giving us a wake-up call of the rigor that he wanted all of the JET participants to experience. But I think even in the day-to-day, really translating that into discipline has been really, really helpful. And I transitioned into an organization that's a Japanese organization. And right now I still work at the same company, but in Canada. So our headquarter is still Japanese and I work for a subsidiary of the Japanese company. And so that served me really well in terms of understanding the strictness and the rigor of Japanese organizations, and then also being able to resonate with my clients who may have not lived in Japan, but also work in multinational contexts that have to serve different norms. And it's funny, I'll add one last point in that when I was a JET, looking forward, I don't think I would have been able to make these connections. But looking back, it's kind of like you put the puzzle pieces together in reverse. And so what that's taught me also is that there's probably a lot of transferable skills that we gain as JETs that sometimes aren't so clear when we write our first resume. But in hindsight, there's so much that we can leverage and toolboxes that we can really use that the JET program fully prepares us for.
I think there are two things in particular that you called out that kind of that I would add to that list, right, of soft skills or transferable skills that you learn, and it's the patience, which you called out, and that adaptability, because there's certainly the very disciplined and strict environments that we work in, and then there's also this, you can end up working at a startup where everything is very casual, and it's a very different sort of thing in terms of how the corporate structure works and decision making and that kind of thing. And so being able to be that nimble is definitely something I think we pick up from our JET experience. How do let's talk a little bit more about those kinds of transferable skills and competencies, but like, how do cross-cultural competencies and international experience benefit somebody that's going to be working in HR, like especially in those like global companies or multicultural teams? Oh, and I'm sorry, Angie, why don't we come back to you, since you were just talking about that a little bit? I just want to drill down a little further.
Sure. And AJ, I noticed you come off mute, so I imagine you have something really good to share, but maybe I'll go ahead and you can add to that. So in terms of Rob, to your question, what I always think about is, regardless of what we do in HR, people are such a huge piece of it. And I almost kind of like to rename human resources as human capital, because we're sometimes a resource, but sometimes we're such a big asset. And I think that cross-cultural sensitivity has really enabled me to see that as much as we're similar, we're also really different. And people are kind of ecosystems of their culture. So we have our individual culture, the experiences that we've grown up with, the families that we've had, all of the different backgrounds that we might have. And then there's that regional culture, if you will, that's bigger than that. And then maybe if we work in organizations, that organizational culture. So that appreciation for the many different layers of culture that can exist in an individual, I think always informs the different policies that we make, the different learning curriculums that we develop, the different resistances to change or openness to change when it comes to driving change inside an organization. And so being both sensitive to that, and then also knowing that sometimes those things are the exact things that we can also really highlight when it comes to development and learning opportunities. And I think as well, because I work with a lot of leaders who are managing a multinational and cross-cultural dynamics as well, I think having that lens and being able to share that lens together helps us see, what are some of our own biases and our own blind spots as well when it comes to leadership and team management, and be able to have new interpretations so that we can see not just through our own cultural lens, but maybe the cultural lenses of others and those that we work with.
Yeah, it's a really exciting space to get to like sort of influence and lead in. AJ, you had some thoughts about that as well.
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the most useful things that I in this space for me has been global perspective. So when I was hired into this job, and also some of the other jobs that I've worked at more recently, the hiring managers who have been hired me, they really like the perspective that I bring, looking holistically at running an organization that's global and understanding what it takes to do that and what it takes to have that perspective, and not being so focused on just like, I'm an American, so in the US, or, if you're in Canada, be Canada, etc. So, having that, and that's something that actually I don't, it's funny, like when I came out of JET, I thought, oh, that's sort of like everyone has that perspective, but not really. Like, and then myself, like even when I'm trying to hire people now, I really try to interview for that and see if they have that perspective because um, it's yeah, it's not there and it's not something that you can teach easily. So having that already, someone who's already trained in that, I think is quite an asset. Now, it's you yourself thinking about, okay, um, what organizations would value that? Not all of them do. And so you think about when you're shopping around for places where you want to work, hey, what kind of place would value my thing? Or do they have a do they have a gap where they need that global perspective that I can bring? And a lot of like what I do is actually helping Rakuten have that global perspective. And we're lucky because Mr. Mikitani, who's our head, he's really big on like Englishinization, like having the internal language of the company be English. It truly is.
Mm.
And also his perspective on hiring foreigners. Like we're one of the within Japan, we're one of the we probably have like one of the highest rates of hiring former Jets in Japan, the non-English side. So, we have a lot of folks who work there and and people from other countries as well. And so, how to integrate them in and how to get the most out of that type of workforce. And it's not easy. And having the perspective, like in my thing is like labor markets. So understanding like, okay, how does the US market differ from France, differ from Japan, et cetera? And being able to explain that to the executives when they try to think like, okay, where am I going to put this team or put this particular job like in the world? So yeah, I think that was one thing that I learned. I picked up on Jet, and it's like sort of ingrained in me. It's like sort of just the way I think, sort of rewired the way I thought.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. You said that it may not be as available or as valuable like in companies that don't necessarily like have a global footprint, but I would argue that it is important, right? Like even if you're just working with like another team within your organization, being able to actually step out of your own perspective and see it from a different viewpoint, I think is still super important. Um, but I also absolutely agree with you in terms of it's not an easy thing to just train someone on, right? Like if you've got like those kinds of experiences where you've lived and worked in like another culture, then you can, kind of develop that. And I do think that is a differentiator for anybody who's had like jet experience. So talking about that, because you said, like hiring managers are looking for those kinds of skills. How have current trends like remote work or DEI or, advances in technology, how have those changed like HR? And then what skills are actually in demand now? And since we're talking about that, like the in demand and the hiring piece of it, Takeshi, do you mind commenting on that question?
So the trend like about remote work is coming a lot, and hybrid. So the communication is gonna be changing, not directly always, not on site. So you have to have more skill set, soft skill,
Mm.
to be able to understand, to be able to communicate, to listen well about other counters. Because right now, a lot of company has a global team. One project is working on somebody from Canada or somebody from Mexico, somebody from there. So it's more necessary to understand, like, be more like a detail oriented about the person, what they are reacting, how they are reacting about it. That kind of a skill set, I think, is more necessary. So the cross culture experiences from being there, and being with so many different type of the person in there, and then listening and be sensitive with the student, teachers, or government. That's experiences are very useful. And other thing like it's getting more global and global, and understanding like nobody's wrong. It's just different culture, different perspective of the view. So be able to accept the other idea is, I think, more necessary in this world. It's getting trend like becoming like a more global. That's what I'm feeling.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. AJ, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see the dynamics and what's been changing and sort of not changing. I think for HR is becoming very much, from my point of view, quantitative field. So having quantitative analytic skills is very important. Now, I'm not talking about, can you build a good spreadsheet, but it's understanding how to tell the story with the data. So that's really important on how to know how to do that. And so, and you don't have to be like an engineer or anyone like that to be able to know how to do that. It's just like thinking about, okay, how that works. So, that's important. I think that's a really big thing there about what's happening. Because business analytics is coming in. There's a lot of, I think, like the entry level into HR right now is through analytics. I think that's probably the best thing, especially for people who are in coming through with like bachelor's degrees and such. I think that's the way to go. You don't see as many things like recruiting. I don't think recruiting's taking a big hit from AI right now, and a lot of companies are looking like a lot of companies cut a lot of their recruiting heads maybe about a year ago or a year and a half ago, and they haven't come back. And they're trying to replace it with AI stuff. So that's something where recruiting is going to be very different. Now, I think at the top end of recruiting, I think it's very um, that still is very valuable, especially like if knowing how to recruit like AI engineers, AI data scientists, machine learning engineers, people like that. So yeah, having a real niche that way is something is really still valuable for recruiting. So if people are coming in learning how to do that, I think is a real thing, and there are opportunities there. I think some of the jobs though, like they're going away, as I said, like recruiting. I think DE&I jobs, unfortunately, I think are going away. They've been cut. You see with the changes to the government and such. I think it's in that space. It's only going to get more challenging in that space. So companies are gonna have to go. But yeah, as I mentioned, analytics, HRIS, HR systems is also really big, especially
Yep.
around systems like Workday. They still need a lot of people who can do that work.
Mhm.
And if you can, people who have opportunities to learn that stuff, sometimes it's from HR analytics side, sometimes it's just from the IT side. You can become very valuable there. But of course, any kind of specialty, you have to watch out that you don't get pigeonholed in there unless you want to, because that can be tough too. That can be sort of career limiting. That's sort of regular rules apply there. But yeah, I mean that's really what I see so far as current trends impacting HR.
Brilliant. Thank you. Angie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think also when I look at the role of HR, regardless of what HR specialization we're in, I think it's very much like the right-hand man to the business leader. So one of the things that I really see as a skill is how much can we really also understand the business context and have business acumen, and kind of know what's going on inside the heads of business leaders and organizations, so that regardless of which HR field you're in, you can serve almost as a partner to the business initiatives and results and outcomes that the organizations are trying to achieve. And because the trends are changing so fast as well, I think it's also kind of forcing, in a positive way, encouraging HR to stay on top of these trends, and be able to almost read a few steps ahead, so that we can be a valuable asset in helping our organizations catch up with these trends, whether it's systems, technology, digital transformation, the way people work, the way that people define work has, I think, changed a lot. Generations seek different purposes and roles
Yep.
for work, and maybe Jet's here, you're experiencing it yourself as well. Do I want to do a 9 to 5? Do I want to work 5 days a week? Do I want to have a full-time or part-time contract work? All of those things are things that employees of organizations are also dealing with. And I think it's really much HR's ability to redefine that. So being aware of the trend and also bringing new trends to the workplace.
Well, and just as an aside, I think when you're looking for opportunities and whatnot, it's less about I mean, it can be about what organizations you're going to go to, but a lot of times for me, it's just like, what am I going to learn from being in these kinds of opportunities? And sometimes it's larger organizations where you do get to kind of like, have that influence at sort of the larger scale, but even smaller companies where you're like, okay, you're more likely to get dragged into a host of different kind of experiences just because of the size of the organization. Thinking about then, like sort of preparing for, if somebody's interested in this path, what are the certifications or, graduate programs or other sort of education resources that are going to help sort of build that credibility if you're wanting to move into HR? And Angie, I know you just spoke, but why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think, Rob, you mentioned it of learning, and I think it's such an ongoing, continuous learning profession, and a lifelong learning profession. For me personally, being in the field of coaching and supporting leadership development and talent management, I got my coaching certification early on in my career. So there's an international coaching federation that oversees the standard and the rigor for coaches. And you go through a training program. There's different tiers of certification. And so I've gone through the different tiers, and I'm aiming for my third, they call it master certified coach, but that's like where coaches want to head to be able to have that biggest impact. So that's been really instrumental and foundational for the work that I do. I talked a little bit about the mini MBA program where I met that coach. That was one of the most useful bridges of moving from a JET to getting more of that private sector experience and knowledge. And then continuing with, attending conferences, courses, curriculums, and then also learning through people. I found that to be really, really helpful. Meeting people from all different industries and walks of life so that you get to learn from their experiences and be able to absorb that in. And then one last thing that I'll share is it's not so much something tangible per se, but almost creating your own board of directors. This was a keyword that my mentor shared with me. And they talked about, organizations have boards of directors. Why don't people? And so kind of having people that you trust as part of your own advisory so that you can learn about finance and accounting and HR and business, even if you're not going into those fields. And it's also a great way to network as well. And those people don't always have to be the same. You can meet lots of different people throughout so that you can build your foundation and your soft and hard skills in that process.
That's brilliant. I love that idea of the board of directors. That's an awesome concept. Takeshi, what are you seeing like in terms of like hiring for HR and whatnot? What are going to be some of the certifications or education that are going to be in demand? Oh, you're on mute.
So for HR position, it's depending on like which part of the HR you're gonna do, like if it's payroll or if it's gonna be a benefit onboarding or if it's gonna be a general HR something like that. But one of the most things in which I see, like if it's more like a manager level on the top of the HR, like a SHARM SCP or SHARM CP, it's more one of the like a credible licensing it's gonna be. But if you are starting to be a HR, it's not like what you have to do, have something like that, but it's gonna be beneficial. Start running for the taking the courses to get the license for Charm, gonna be good. And then inside of the Charm website, there's some small courses as well. Doesn't have to be the Charm CP, but before that, there's one specialty for the courses about it. That also gonna be a good way to show the proof that you are trying to learn the structure about HR. That's kind of a certification. I think it's been very beneficial if you want to start as an entry level for the HR positions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Takeshi. And thank you, Jessica, for putting that link up there. So yeah, sure. The Society for Human Resources Management, it's HRM, a tremendous organization for all HR practitioners. It's a great resource. and a great place to kind of like learn about the profession as well. AJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you have to do a needs assessment for yourself and see what you need. It's like so like if you're just starting out trying to learn about HR, a lot of it is sort of these things that like that Angie had mentioned regarding just learning what's out there, sort of what people are doing. Go out and interview people who are doing work and to learn about what their jobs are. I think it's really important. I think a lot of people get into jobs and they don't have full picture of what it's like. Now you'll never get 100%, right? Unless you do it. However, you can do your darndest to try to get in. And I think that people really people initially they don't mind talking about what they do. If you approach them to do informationals, as long as you approach it as like a hey, I'm trying to get into HR, I want to learn more about HR, especially what you do. I think it's fine. You know, they get a sense that okay, this person's not looking for a job directly. They're just looking to join, to look and learn. And I think people will be willing to talk with you, even people at different levels. So I think that's great. Then okay, then if you really want to get into HR, there's a few different ways. So I mean, I would say if you're really sold on HR, the best way to go in is to get a master's in HR or a master's in industrial and labor relations from one of the top schools in the country in the US. So these are schools like Cornell, Michigan State, University of Illinois, Rutgers. Um, they're usually a year and a half or 2 year programs, residential usually, but they have almost 100%, well, pretty much 100% placement, maybe even more. And these are the feeders into the the management development programs in HR in the big companies. Like that's how I got into Microsoft. I went to Cornell. I got my MBA and my master's. Through that, through recruiting, I got my job at Microsoft, and um, it was a lot easier. It was a lot easier. I didn't have to start at the bottom. I didn't have to start as a entry level recruiter. I didn't have to start as a HR assistant or anything like that. I went right in as a business partner. So like there these programs that are out there, and like the return on investment is high, but you got to have the money to do it. And they're not cheap. Even though they're state schools, sometimes you get a break. It's not cheap. So I think that's that. And then um, sort of moving away from that, I think there are other things that you can take to really to learn and to go. I think Sherm is good. I think some of Sherm Sherm is okay. Like I'm not a wild fan of Sherm on it, so I'll sort of be on the other side of the Sherm fence. Um, I think they've done a lot, but I think there's still somewhat a little bit of the old personnel department in Sherm. But that's sort of I mean, it's a debate. It's like anything. But I mean, they're really valuable to help you learn like the laws and just basically how HR is done, so the basics of it. So, just go in with a grain of salt. It's really useful stuff that way. In my profession, World at Work is one where it's really useful, and we
Mhm.
have a certification there. That one is sort of becoming a little bit like a SHRM, where they're sort of getting themselves they're sort of working themselves out of relevance because to get the certification, they've kept adding on exams, and they're really expensive. And so sometimes you can't get an employer who will sponsor you. So, but I think the material that they have is quite useful. So if you want to get into compensation or anything related to that. And then I think like there's emerging stuff, especially in like HR analytics. That's I think really
Mhm.
interesting. Learning that stuff. Learning like Python and those kind of things. And those things, I mean, there are things on the internet, but also there's like either for free or for things you can take at a low cost in like a community college and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there. I think it's just focusing on there's so much out there. It's almost like, okay, what do I need? So that's why it's like again going back doing that needs assessment, talking to folks and saying, okay, what would work to get me into what I want to do?
Well, and I think what's clear from all of you sharing your experiences and opinions is that there's multiple ways to actually get into HR, right? Like there's not one single, confirmed path or anything. Like for me, I took, I went to a community college and they offered like an HR certificate program, and it was a great introduction to like a lot of different facets of HR. And that was enough for me to like sort of open some doors to actually move into the profession. And then once you're in there, as Angie said, it's identifying those mentors and getting the experience from a host of other people to be able to kind of build your skills. Since we are talking about that and getting into it, what piece of advice can you share with our audience and who hopefully are going to become early professionals in HR? What are the things that you wish that you had known before starting your career? And sorry, let's start with Angie.
I think that's a great question, because we're always wiser years down the road than we are when we first start. And yet there's still so much to learn. I bet I'd give myself new advice 10, 20 years from now. But I think one thing that served me well and that I've seen serve my fellow JET alumni really well is the openness to saying yes to opportunities. And so it's been really interesting to see the cohort that I went through JET with. There's still alumni that are in Japan doing different various work. Some of my friends have helped out at the Olympics. Some have gone back to US, Canada. Others have decided to quit working and start their own company. All of these different opportunities, regardless of whether you're in HR or another industry, I think often come with that initial yes and deep dive into a new field. And I think for me personally, when I first started, I didn't think that I would be doing this for that long, to be honest. I thought it was interesting, but I would do it for 2 or 3 years. I might do something else. And it turned out to be something that I really enjoy. But if I had thought really seriously about it at that moment, I probably would have been a little bit scared to kind of jump in. And so, sometimes saying yes to that initial opportunity can be something that leads to something so much bigger. And so what you do right out of JET might not be your dream job, or it might not be your forever job. It could even just be something that you want to do now that might change down the road. But being able to dive into that, it might open up doors. You might find out what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at. So having that openness is something that I might identify as a bit of an advice to my former self and to the group here.
No, I love that. And I'll say +1 to everything that you just said. And in addition to that, I would also say, be realistic about like what you're going to be able to do. Like you're not going to walk into an organization and get promoted like in 3 months or anything like that. But again, look for those learning opportunities and those opportunities to expand those skill sets. AJ, what do you think? What kind of advice would you offer?
Sure. I would say I used to think of a career as like, oh, you get with an organization, you stay there forever. And that's really not the case. So it's then like thinking about how am I going to build my portfolio? So like whenever I interview people, if you think about interviews, right? A lot of them are behavioral based and they're like, okay, tell me about a time when you did this or that. Like, so you need to have like a really good set of stories and things and accomplishments that you've been able to bring. And as Angie had said earlier, like having that business acumen to understand what you're doing and how it impacts the profit and loss of the company, especially if you're in company stuff, is really important. So then you think about, okay, the experiences that I want to have, um, how can this company sort of get me a few of those things I can put on my resume that are good accomplishments? And are they going to give me a chance to do this? Are they going to give me a chance to learn? Especially earlier on, I wouldn't focus as much on compensation because, like on your own compensation, even though I'm a comp guy, I'm always pushing for people to get higher, get more money. But, really think of like the total value that you're getting from that company. And a lot of companies, they offer a lot of ways to train you and you learning and mentorship and all of that stuff, which is really valuable and helps you learn. And then you can build upon that and go, go do things like that. And so, yeah, I'd say like, think of that. And then, think about, okay, I'm going to go into this company. I'm going to do this job. I want to do this and this and this, like have like goals. And then assess yourself 3 months, 6 months, etc. Like, okay, am I getting close to that goal? If you're not, think about, okay, maybe I need to move on to a different place. So also that where thinking that way, it is a bit of a pain in the neck because you find yourself looking for jobs often, or at least like looking externally while you're working, but you got to have your eyes open. I think that's a lot of it. So that's one thing there of like, keeping your eyes open, having goals of what you want to learn at a current company would be really things, takeaways that, I didn't know when I started out.
Yeah, I know. I think all of that is super important. And going back to one of your earlier points about, being able to enrich and tell that story, I think one of the common things you'll find with like I think most JET alum is we're all great storytellers. Takeshi, what do you think? What kind of advice would you offer somebody starting their career in HR?
So one of the things which I see like some of the blind spot most of the candidate who don't know is like if you're here like in US and Canada, the first one way you can start as an entry level doing something little by little for HR is find some position whatever it's okay in the headquarter in US company and in the US. So even the admin position in the headquarter in California, headquarter in there, and then a lot of our client they start as admin, but in there, if it's a headquarter, there's an HR portion in there, and they always need somebody to support them, like a little bit of a payroll things, a little bit of recruiting thing, or negotiating up with the insurance company. So once you get in there. And a good thing for Japanese company, they have a mindset about the job rotations. So once you get in there, if you have an interest in there, if you study in there, if you're willing to grow in the company, they are willing to give you chances to try something new, like reskilling you for the different portion as well. So of course, going for some schools first and get into the HR directly, that's one choices as well. But one thing, good things for you in here is headquarter in Japanese company of headquarter in US in Canada, there is a lot of chances to get in there first in headquarter and then be able to transfer little by little there. I have a lot of candidates who started their career in that way. So that's just one way to a little bit longer where you have to think about long term goals as well. But in reality, when you think in a 10 years, something like that, actually it was like a quite short step in there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing which I see from the standpoint of the recruiting company.
Back to the theme of the nonlinear path.
Yeah.
Well, we just have a couple of more minutes, and so we kind of want to wrap up, but I want to kind of close this on HR can be viewed sometimes in sort of a, oh, I'm not sure about the HR people or the HR police or whatever. But rather than do that, I want to make sure that we're closing on a positive note. So what is it that you find most rewarding about working in HR, and how does that align with like sort of the values or interests that you developed during your time on JET? And sorry, we need to be kind of brief because we are running out of time. AJ.
Yes, thanks. So the ability to have real impact, that's really what I like about this job. And you're there as an advisor to management. And that's like if sort of how I think of myself when people ask, what do you really do? And I'm like, yeah, I'm an advisor to management to make them make good decisions. And so the managers that you work with, they are alone. They don't have anybody, like they can't I mean, it's very political for managers. They can't completely trust their people who work on their team because if they have this whole manager employee dynamic, which they have to respect, um, they can't completely trust the management team that they're a part of because they're all jockeying for the job up top. Their manager provides them with support, but not completely because their manager doesn't want them to take their job. So, you're there really with advice and you can provide really unvarnished, really good advice. And so that's why it's important for you to know the data, to be there and to give them just like the hard facts, like this is it, these are your options. Always present options and have them select. And it's amazing. And the rapport and the trust that you get in just working there. And the second thing is influencing good management decisions. So like making sure that managers and such are fair to employees, that they're treating them fairly, that they're paying people fairly, like in my part, is very important to me, to make sure that that's there. Any kind of stuff that's just really bad management behavior, you have the opportunity to really make sure that that doesn't get done. Now, it's an influencing way, right? It's not hard. You rarely have the hard authority over things. So a lot of it's that influencing. And again, that's like, that's why it's great with Jet, like you learning how to influence folks, to have meetings on the side, izakaya time, all that stuff, it really makes a difference.
Thanks so much, AJ. And Angie?
Thank you, Rob. What AJ shared actually reminded me of this quote of where people join companies, but they leave managers. And I hold that really true to the type of work that we do. And I find that to also be one of the most rewarding pieces, in the sense that because people spend so much time at work and in organizations, their experiences there make such a big difference on the purpose, the rewards that they feel, how much fulfillment they feel in their day to day. And through working with leaders, we get to transform leadership, which transforms the experiences of so many people inside the organization. And when you have good leadership, you can have unmasked potential. There's unlimited possibilities. And I think the ability to have that sort of transformative power on a day-to-day basis is really rewarding. And I think for us Jets as well, we love working with others in that autonomy and seeing things through. And I think HR is one of those fields that gives you that great balance of having that sense of responsibility, and also the sense of autonomy to be able to drive things through and really have an impact on the day-to-day lives of people, and also the sum of that, the day-to-day success of the organization as a whole.
All right, brilliant. Well, thank you all for sharing your experiences and your perspective. And hopefully we've convinced a number of people to become that next generation of HR professionals.
All right, great. Thank you all so much. I learned a ton from this, and I know people have probably tons of questions. So before we close out this panel part, I want to first introduce Saskia, because she's going to be also hosting a breakout room. And then I'm going to explain, or Saskia, I don't know, maybe you want to explain your the 2 seats that you're giving away, and also your the 5 sessions that you're giving away. And before you explain those, I will say those are going to be we will send you the opportunity to basically win those in our post-event follow-up email. So we'll send you guys an email probably tomorrow sometime, and there'll be a survey in there. And one of there will be questions in that survey where you can indicate whether or not you'd like to be considered for one of the 5 sessions, like one-on-one sessions that Saskia is offering, or one of the 2 seats that she's offering. So you have to basically fill out, we're holding those ransom. You have to fill out the survey in order to be considered to win those. But just, listening to the discussion tonight, there was definitely advice in there. I think it was from AJ, talking about how, to really spend some time talking to someone to find out, what the different pathways in HR are, and how you can really, start to get your, crack the door open on those. And so this is exactly what Saskia is offering. So Saskia, I'll have you introduce yourself and explain that real quick.
All right. Well, thank you. So I'm Saskia. I am the perfect example of a non-linear path to HR. So I was one of the first Belgian Jets who went to Japan as a CIR back in 1997. I ended up in Ishikawa, so I didn't meet Takeshi-san there, but who knows? We probably know people who know people, right? So after that, I went back to Belgium. I worked as an ops manager. Then I had my own company. I actually played professional wadaiko at one point. Then I decided I wanted to go back to Japan. So I did my MBA in Tokyo with Globus. That gave me the opportunity to go into Deloitte in their HR department. So I was very happily working there in DEI, in talent development, doing all these kinds of things. But now I'm in the United States because I married this Japanese man who's a software developer, and he dragged me to San Francisco. And so because I moved from Japan to the United States, not my country, right? No idea what HR is about here. I actually went to SHRM because I needed to learn the basics of American HR. So that was very instrumental for me. I went into doing like one person HR. And then 2 years ago, I pivoted again when Japan Consulting Office asked me to work with them. So now I'm working as their managing director. I'm still doing HR, fractional HR on the side, but with Japan Consulting Office, I do these training sessions. It's cross-cultural communication, also business efficiency. And so I can talk about my experience about getting in Japan, right, from JET to through schooling into HR, or I can talk about getting into HR here in the United States. And so maybe one last little update. I'm now part of USJETAA because I recently became a citizen of the United States. So yay.
Thanks, Saskia. So you can see we've got such a rich JET alumni community here. And I love that, whenever I put a call out to panelists, I'm like, hey, we're gonna do a panel on this. Like, so many JET alums raise their hands and are willing to answer questions and just help other JETs be successful as well.